Preposition min. Here we have another preposition. We've looked at 3 so far. Le, bon, que, the inseparable prepositions. This one means from, to come from someone or someplace. And it, like le, bon, que, usually is written together with the word that it follows. It is written inseparably. It can function by itself or stand by itself, in which case it is attached by makef to the following word. For instance, min, and this, by the way, is how you spell it, min, so CVC. If it's attached to something, then it would have a makef there, min ha'ir, from the city. So you can see that it's standing alone but not totally alone. It's got this makef, and the makef, if you remember, is something that joins 2 words that are closely related. Now, if it does, or when it does function inseparably, which is usually the case, there are a couple of rules, and that's what we want to look at here. So let's look at what happens to min. How does it change when you attach it to words? The first rule concerns what happens with non-gutturals. What happens when you attach it to non-gutturals? Now, the moment I say that, non-gutturals, you can probably guess, okay, so something different with gutturals, and so what do gutturals not do? They don't double, so there's probably something to do with doubling. Often things divide up, gutturals, non-gutturals, and typically has to do with doubling. Well, what happens with non-gutturals is the nun of min assimilates. So you have min. The nun, remember this is a nun sulfite, a final nun. It assimilates. Now what is assimilation? It assimilates to the next letter. Assimilation is when a letter sounds like one of its neighbors. In this case it's assimilating forward, so it will sound like the next letter. We have this in English. In fact, we have a very, very similar circumstance here. If you look at the word like, if you put in on accurate, you get inaccurate. So this is a negative prefix. If you put in on mobile, let me just write it out here, mobile, do you get immobile? No, you don't. You get immobile. So this guy changes, the N changes to an M under the influence of having to pronounce this next thing. It's too difficult in English to say immobile. It's easier just to slur this or change this to be another M, so it's immobile becomes immobile. And this is really the same thing that's happening here, except in Hebrew. So if we have a word like melech, let's write it down here. So king, melech. If we add min on here, let's see, where should we do this here? We'll do it right here, I guess. In an inseparable fashion, so we have the nun here, M-I-N, or mem hidik nun, because we want to attach it to it. This will become a mem, and so let's actually just do that. Let's make it a mem. Delete it, change it into a mem. So put a mem in here. So in melech became, or min melech became mim melech. But in Hebrew you don't write 2 mems together like that, consonants next to each other. Instead you use a dagesh. So the way you write this is, and I'm going to do it over here. Mi. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Mi. Melech. So you put the dagesh forte there. Mi melech. So what's happened here is effectively our nun has become a dagesh forte. That's what's happening visually, orthographically, when you look at the symbols on the page. What's really happening is this thing called assimilation. I suppose I should write that out. Assimilation. Assimilation. And this is a linguistic phenomenon. It's a phonetic thing. Happens in many languages. And so the nun is becoming, it's the next letter, and we write it with a dagesh. The nun has assimilated to the mem, and we have a dagesh. Mimelech. So that's what happens with non-gutturals. Now, just a note, and again, this is just applying rules we already know. If the next letter is a letter that has a vocal sheva under it, and you add min, you want to double this, then sometimes it won't double. And that is simply because, I'm not sure how to write this here, that's our coal mine rule, right? Coal mine, mayan, coal mayan. Simply our mnemonic for the letters that will drop their dagesh forte when you expect them to have a dagesh forte for some reason. In this case, it's the assimilated nun that's producing the dagesh. They will drop it if they're followed by or sometimes drop it if they're followed by a vocal sheva. In addition, if it is yud, in the case of min, it will sometimes, or maybe always, quiesce. So I've avoided writing an example here because I wanted to write the yud one. So let's do that. Yud is one of these, okay? So, Yehuda, we've already looked at Yehuda this way in the quiescence module. Yehuda, if we add min to it, min. So let's write it on like this. The reason I'm writing this nun rather than the ending nun is because I want to attach it. So, min, this is going to change to a yud. We'll run through all the steps here just to make this really clear. Okay? It's going to assimilate. Effectively what's happening is it is changing to a yud. Okay? But we don't write it that way in Hebrew. We write a dagesh. So, okay, let's write a dagesh. So let's get rid of this. And let's write our dagesh. So we'll put our dagesh there. Okay? And let's snuggle this guy up over here. I guess I could just drop him in right about there. Okay? So now we have a dagesh. However, we apply the coal mine rule, which says that if the coal mine letters are followed by a vocal sheva, and they should have a dagesh, sometimes they'll lose it. In this case, it does. So let's get rid of our dagesh. No dagesh. Dagesh drops because of the coal mine rule. Now, with yud in particular, it'll quiesce. So, if it quiesces, it loses its vowel, and so we get mihuda. So we had all these steps. Now they're just applications of what we've seen before, largely the material that we saw in the quiescence module. But we have doubling because of the nun assimilating. We have loss of the dagesh because of coal mine rule. We have loss of the vowel because of quiescence. In any case, rule 1 is that before non-gutturals, nun assimilates, you get a dagesh. What happens before gutturals? Before gutturals, that's our second rule. And of course, the problem with gutturals in this case is they don't double, so we don't get the nun assimilating. What happens is the nun drops. Nun drops. And because we've dropped something, we have some compensation. And the hiddick of min lengthens. So the hiddick lengthens to its sede. This is the hiddick of the min. Let me show you an example. So if we have ish, oops, that's ish. Let's put a yud in there. So ish, meaning man. If we add min on that, min, so when I add min on there, I guess to be consistent I should make this like this. This cannot assimilate, so it drops, and this will lengthen. So let's drop this guy. We'll tuck these ones up here just to make it more like a word, and this guy will lengthen to etsere. And it makes sense that a hitic lengthens to etsere because it's in the same vertical family, if you remember your vowel chart. So nun drops, and you get compensatory lengthening hitic to etsere. Now, if we have, this also happens incidentally, with the article. If you have an article on something like ha'ir, the hey of the article, this is a comments by the way, the hey of the article is a guttural, and so you get the same behavior. So, min, the nun will not assimilate. You'll get your meme, and because the nun has not assimilated, it will drop because this cannot double. Then you'll get lengthening, compensatory lengthening. Okay, so with non-gutturals, nun assimilates, and you see it as a dagesh. With gutturals, it drops, and you get compensatory lengthening.